Welcome back, boys and girls. Today we are going to be doing some maintenance on my wife's daily driver. That's right, it's maintenance time. Not a project, but this is still needed to be done. It's a 2010 Acura MDX, and this is gonna be the process basically for any of your Honda V6 engines produced in the last 15 years or so. And let's get right into it. We have some stuff here for the second gen Acura, which is 2007 through 2013, starting with the water pump and timing belt kit. So this is the same OEM equivalent. You can get this for cheaper than buying the OEM parts from Honda. I've also got a serpentine belt here, and this is from Gates. It's fine. It's got some goop on it. I don't know what that is. And we've also got our set of spark plugs. These are sort of expensive for spark plugs. The whole set cost about 80 bucks. We've got our oil, it's 5W20 is the normal, and some concentrated Prestone. Now, some people get snobby about this, that you need the blue Honda stuff. It's really not required. I've never had a problem with that. The blue stuff may last a little longer or something, but there's really no point. Just change your coolant, people. Next are some tools. We've got a rather large impact gun there. This is going to be absolutely required. This is an air gun, but it doesn't have to be air, but you need a beefy one to do it the way that we're going to be doing it. We've also got a ratchet, electric ratchet, and a special socket. Look at the thickness on this guy. It's beefy, only 19 millimeters, but look at the walls. So that is required to get off the feared Honda crank pulley bolt. So you can see the difference there between a normal 19 and this guy. We've got some other miscellaneous things. This is a clip pooler for the little tabs, distilled water to get the right concentration there for our stuff. Pans, miscellaneous hand tools, some extensions, and of course a bunch of different sockets that we'll need. Obviously it's metric. We've got a torque wrench. That's important. And we've got some things like a little fluid transfer. First, let's get in the car and turn up the heat all the way. This opens a valve so that our coolant can drain out. We want the AC to be off and this on high, and that will open it up. Let it run for a second, and then we can shut off the car. At this point, it's a good idea to put your car into neutral. Next, we're going to pop the hood and get to the battery and disconnect the negative battery cable. This is a 10 millimeter, and we just pop that off and put it to one side so it can't reconnect accidentally. Next step is we're going to jack up the car. I like to get the jack under a front jack point. There's a hook right here in the middle that's used for towing that you can use. It's connected to the subframe. And this leaves the side jacking point available to get your jack stand under. Always use jack stands. Don't use your jack as your primary support. We're only going to need to this jacks up both the front wheels, but we're only going to need to put a jack stand under the passenger side wheel. The other one can stay on the ground. And the lower it is, actually a little bit the better, because it allows for proper drainage of everything with the coolant. And that's all we need, this little room. All right, we can take those lugs off. I've got a couple removed. I'll pop the rest off. And we can get the tire out of the way. You may want to do this on the floor if you're not using your impact tool, but since we should be using an impact tool, you should have that readily available. And I like to stick the wheel under the car as a little bit of extra protection in case something happens. Now we can take a look at what we're going to be dealing with. If you look straight in past the wheel and brake caliper, you'll see the crank pulley bolt right there. Depending on the generation of your car, you may have some plastic around it which may need to be removed, but in my case there's really nothing that has to come out of the way. And just for fun, I decided to use this mini torque wrench. It's supposedly rated to 450 foot-pounds just to see what would happen, and absolutely nothing. I hammered on this for a while with that thing, and it wasn't budging at all. So don't waste your time. You need a big beefy gun. All right, so this guy's supposed to be good for up to 1,000 foot-pounds reverse torque, and it also was struggling. And so what I ended up having to do here is, I'm fiddling around with the light here, but I'll tell you basically what needed to happen was I used some penetrating fluid for a while. It's a really big bolt with a really big washer, and that has a lot of torque on it. But eventually I had to use the torch. So what you can do is put the torch on, unfortunately I didn't get it filmed, but on a corner of the bolt, focused on the washer primarily. That's where the heat needs to go. So what that's going to do is kind of expand the washer a little bit. It's going to break up some of the tension on that bolt, and then that will allow you to actually get that thing to release. But it was a good 5 minutes of pounding after having the torch on it for another several minutes. I like taking care of that part first, because if that doesn't come off, there's no point in doing the rest. You're going to have to take it somewhere or get some weight and get somebody with a bigger impact gun who can help you out, or get the adapter that allows you to put a breaker on there, breaker bar on there. And keep in mind, if you do it that way, you may need about 8 feet of breaker bar to be able to get this off. So anyway, that's why I do that first. And now we can actually move on to the actual real disassembly. All right, get the engine cover off. It's a half turn. These little plastic screws, and it pulls right off. And then what we'll be doing is focusing on the reservoir for the power steering, and then we'll get the power steering pump off because it's at the top of the engine, and we'll basically just be moving it aside. There's a hose down in there right there, basically, that needs to come off, and we'll need to finish draining it. Lay that aside there. But we'll use our little fluid transfer pump to get the stuff out of there that we need. We're also going to take out the coolant reservoir, and we need to get down. All this is necessary because we need to get down into the motor mount brackets below all this. All right, got my pump set up, stuck a little empty quart thing of container in there, and I'm just going to pump this stuff out. You want to try to work it down as close as you can to that little hose, because that's going to be full as well, obviously. So try to suck out as much as you can. If you can get it to kind of almost go into the hose, that would be perfect, because that'll suck it out and leave less of a mess. So now I'm going to pop off the power steering hose. I've got some angled needle noses there. There's a little clamp right here, which I can just push off and up. And then this will just work off by hand. You might want to put a rag down below this because there will be some leakage. All right, now we can get our coolant reservoir out. It's just a piece of plastic. It's held in place by this one little clip, which we can pull. You can use a screwdriver to do that. And you want to remove the cap for it. The hose is attached to it. You can remove the hose, but it's easy just to unscrew the cap, and then you can work it out. Once the power steering reservoir is out of the way, it will come out. It may be full, so you want to be careful not to spill all over the place. Now, after we get this out of the way, we're going to want to get the PCM out of the way, because that's in our way for the motor mount. So we've got a bracket up top, and there's just a few bolts underneath which can remove this entire thing. Actually, we're going to have to take. Now, I actually recommend taking off this entire bracket that it's attached to. You'll see that I take out the PCM only. This is what the plastic cover looks like. It's got these little tabs in the back. That one was kind of annoying to get out. And then it's got a couple on the top and one on the side there as well. But if you take out the whole bracket, it gives you a lot more space, and it allows you to not cut up your arm while you're working on from the top on the front of the engine there. But in any case, we'll have to disconnect these 3 cables from the module, which just basically there's a lift hook on the top and then they pull right off. And then there's one more down in the depths there, which you may not be able to see. It's underneath them, but it's down there. And this is all to get access to the motor mounts. There are 3 bolts if you take out the module by itself, but like I said, take off the top bolt there for the whole bracket. And then there's a side bolt connecting to the AC lines instead of these bolts. That's what I recommend, actually. So now we've got our thing released, and we're going to move this harness out of the way. There's a little tab that gets connected to the bracket over here on the right, which you can squeeze on and it will release this, and we'll be able to just take this whole harness and move it to the back and get it out of the way. So you can see where you push and it'll come out. The last connector is at the very bottom down there. It's disconnected, but I'll show you the connector here real quick. It can be a little fiddly. It's got another little pull thing, that white, which you pull back and then it will release. So it's like that in the car, and you pull back. He's in there like this, so you pull back on this, and then you can slide it up. All right, this is a little ground strap. Do not forget that strap, absolutely required. And what we did was we just took out the nut right here at the top of this bracket because it's easiest to get to. There's another one down there you could do if you wanted to. But this makes it obvious that this needs to go back, so we'll just take this out and lay it to one side, and then we'll put the bolt right back in there. Alright, I lightly supported the engine. I don't think this is required, but I lightly supported the engine from the oil pan with the jack, and got these out. That first bolt on the left is this one, this stubby one, and it is a 17. And then we've got 2 of these zinc coated ones, which are 14s. Alright, so you can inspect the motor mount itself, the rubber, and look for any cracking in here. These are lag bolts that go through the frame, and the threads are down here. You can see they've taken some corrosion. What really matters though is the threads at the bottom. So what you may want to do is put some anti-seize on there when they go back in, or replace these guys. Next we can do our serpentine belt. We're going to get our tool down there on the tensioner. It's right here. This is what I used, a deep well socket to get it on there. There's an AC line that's kind of in the way, but you can pop out the AC line from its little plastic bracket, and that allows you to move it a little bit. But that's where it goes right there. It's already off on mine, but I want to show you exactly where it goes. And these real thin belt removers are useful, but not absolutely required. Now we're going to get the power steering pump off. I've got the ratchet on one bolt, and then there's a second bolt right underneath everything right there. Now we can move this aside, and the way I did that was I had to take off this sensor here just to get it out of the way, and then you can kind of pull it forward and past this, and then it would kind of come out, and now it can just kind of sit over there out of the way. So now we can see our upper covers. All right, we got our tensioner pulley out for the serpentine belt, and that it's oriented like this in the car. This is the one that needs to come out, the screw, and then it's also got this. So this one's a 14, and this one is a 10. I'm gonna get the motor mount bracket over here out. Didn't get that film, but it's just 3 bolts going straight into the engine block that you remove. So now we're going to get to top dead center. We're going to look at these numbers down here. This is the line, and then there's a number kind of right up
next to it. You can see it maybe on this one. There. And so we're going to rotate this until one is pointing. You can see, if you look in there, where the top is. It's a little hard to see. Right there. We want it to line up with this mark right here. And what we're going to do is put the crank bolt back in and get you a long extension, or it can be multiple extensions. It's not going to be like really hard to torque in a bar on here. And there's going to be a little resistance because of the compression of the cylinders as they come around. It'll be like resistance and then no resistance, resistance and then no resistance. If you forgot to put the car into neutral before starting this whole process and your engine is now apart, there's an easy way to fix this. You can come around to the inside of the car and you can look in here, and there's a little thing that can be taken out with a screwdriver, and then you shove a screwdriver down there, or your key even, and it'll unlock this and allow you to put it in neutral. So be sure to do that before you go, before you try to turn the engine. And keep in mind this engine turns clockwise, so we'll be rotating it like this, going that direction. All right. A different angle on it. So as I'm standing here, turning this, I can look directly down in there, and I can see when it's going to line up with number one and top dead center. And you can see there's a mark on the cam, and then as well here, these are going to be lined up. So we should be all set, and we can verify. Now that we have that, we can verify down below as well to make sure that the crank pulley is also indicating top dead center.
Okay, so really hard to film, but working from the bottom I found is easiest. If you're first going to take off the tensioner, that's on the kind of the left side, and it's got these two 10 mils on there. That's going to release the tension on the timing belt. Do not do this until you have actually got it set up for time, as we just saw in the previous step. But we're going to get these out, and then we're also going to be able to take out the pulleys, which I'll show here in a second.
We got this, the tensioner, and you can check for leakage. This one looks okay, but we're replacing it anyway. And we're going to be replacing all this. We're going to hang on to this and the sleeve, and got this. And this one looks like it's had some slip thread locker on it. It was a little bit harder to get out, so I guess we'll reapply some medium strength thread locker on there. All right, so one thing we can do is we can drain our block, and that way we don't have a big mess of stuff. And you'll see that there's this line right there. This is a standard sized line for like bleeding brakes or your clutch, and basically it is up here where I've got a little wrench on here. This is a 12. So what there is a little copper thing which is going into the tube, or brass looking fitting, and then this is going to go into our catch pan. We can hopefully break this loose. It's got a flex head. There we go. There we go. We just needed a quarter of a turn, and this is going really slowly because I did not on purpose open the radiator cap. So if I do that, it should go quicker.
And we're going to come on to the front center here of the radiator and reach up into that hole and get the pepcock that's in there. and get all that coolant out of there. It can be a little tight if you've got big hands, but you can also reach in there with a small set of pliers or something like that to get on there to just give it a little bit of a twist. With the block and radiator drained, you can pop off the water pump. It's got about 8 bolts. I think they're all 10s, and there's still going to be a little bit of fluid, so you're going to want to have a catch pan ready. But there's not too much to do after that. Usually the surfaces are fairly clean. You can wipe them down, make sure there's nothing there. The old one looks, in my case, pretty good. Don't see anything wrong with it, but we're definitely going to replace it while we're in here. Our kit contains a new O-ring, and we should be good to go.
Okay, there's a new one. We got our sleeve, bolt. We've got our new pulley, and this side is facing inwards. The flat side goes in, and then our bolt drops right into there, and it's going to seat right there. But what I'm going to do is give this a clean with a wire brush, and we're going to apply some new thread locker on there because that's what it came with, so we might as well do that. I'll give you the torque specs on those. And then setting up our water pump, we put a thin amount of silicone grease around the outside, some lubrication there, and then we will be able to install that.
All right, let's get that one bolt cleaned up with the threads before we reapply. Got a wire brush. Get that all nice and cleaned out.
All right, so now get the tensioner in, and do not pull the pin, of course. Wait on that, and then we can get the pulleys in. All right, we're going to start from the bottom. I put a small bit of cardboard in there to hold the new timing belt. We're going to keep the tension on it going counterclockwise, so going up and to the right or towards the front of the car. And then we'll work it over each pulley and around the each cam. So I want to spend a few minutes saying what this feels like. A lot of times you can get your alignments right, but you've actually not set it up correctly. So it's important that there be not that much slack on this side. So you can see here I'm pushing, that's all I get. Just a little bit of slack, and it's quite tight everywhere, including over here. So we got all the tautness is on this side, and then down here, this is where we still have a little bit of looseness off the pulley. I haven't pulled, you can see it down in there, I haven't pulled the pin yet for the tensioner. And so we haven't got the full tightness on here. But when setting this up, it's important that there not be a lot of slack in these areas, because otherwise you'll be off. You'll end up being off a tooth. When the slack gets taken up, as it naturally will on the other side, this will rotate. So it'll be off.
I want to mention here that you can also manipulate these cams with a wrench. So if you put either an open or a closed-in wrench on here, I think it's a 19, you can move these cams just a hair to get the belt to go over with the appropriate tautness. Now, it's possible for them, they're kind of under pressure because of the valve springs. So it's possible for this thing to snap over about a third of a turn accidentally. That is not a big deal. All you have to do is rotate it back to where it was. and you just have to put the timing, line up the marks again right where it was, and it'll hang out there just fine. You'll kind of feel pressure as you muscle it back into position, but it's really not that bad, and you haven't screwed up anything. So sometimes manipulation with a wrench on here is necessary to get each one of the teeth on the belt over the right teeth on the cam, so that you have the appropriate tautness, and that's how you can kind of handle that.
Okay, I've cranked it over a good 6 times in terms of revolutions at the crank, and everything still matches up. You really only need 2 revolutions, but 6 just triple checks it.
Now that the timing is all done, we can reverse our disassembly process and put everything back together. We got to get our covers back on, and that is sort of fiddly, so that may take a little while, but you just have to be patient. Then we'll get our bracket back on for the mounts, the motor mount. We'll be able to put the actual motor mount on the frame side back on, and then we'll get the power steering pump back installed and the reservoir as well.
All right. Getting the serpentine belt on is a little interesting because of all these little doodads. If you take this out of this clip, you can kind of move it around a little bit, and then you can get your serpentine belt tool in there, and it should slip over fairly easily once you've got the tension off, and then you can move and put your power steering reservoir back on, and remember to fill that back up, and then get your antifreeze reservoir on there as well. We don't need to fill it up yet. We're going to fill it up after we bleed it. And so this is not really required, but this is a handy tool. Basically, it comes with a bunch of attachments that look like this. It have, works for various cars. There's like a bunch of them and in a kit. And then you find the ones that work for your car, and you put this in here. Now this is the highest point now of your cooling system, and so all the air will rise to this point, and it'll bubble out and not splash and make a mess and stuff like that. We basically fill this slowly, and then we leave about a few inches in there, and then we start the engine, and you'll see the bubbles come up. When it goes down, you add a little bit more. And when you're done, you don't have to worry about excess. You don't have to time it just right. You've got this little plunger guy that goes in there, seals it, pop it right off. And then you can take that, you can dump it in the reservoir, fill that up at the very end. All right, went ahead and started the engine. As you can see, there's a few bubbles. So we'll just let that go. Basically what we want to do is wait until the engine warms up completely and the fan has come on and turned off and on again. And then that way we know the coolant is circulating all around. And we want to keep an eye on this and top it off if necessary. We want to look for leaks. We just replaced the water pump, so if there's anything pouring down the side of the engine here, or really the front of the engine, we would like to know sooner rather than later. Check under the radiator, make sure that the little pepcock valve is sealed tightly, and make sure there's no drips from our little engine block drain.
Well, that will do it for today. Thanks for watching. I hope this gives you the confidence to do this yourself. I checked at the dealer. This whole process would cost about $1,200. And then the follow-up to this is the spark plugs, which they wanted $349 to do, which is absolutely insane. So with that, please don't forget to click subscribe if you like watching projects of this type. And I'll see you next time.